In the heart of a dense forest stood an old, forgotten asylum. It had been abandoned for decades, its history buried under layers of dust and overgrown vines. The locals believed it was cursed, and no one dared to go near it. However, a group of four friends, Jake, Lisa, Ben, and Sarah, decided to explore it after hearing the eerie tales. "Are we really doing this, when Lisa asked, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "Of course," Jake replied, leading the way. "It's just an old building." As they approached the asylum, the air grew colder, and an unsettling silence surrounded them. Inside, the asylum was even more ominous. The walls were lined with peeling paint, and the floor was covered in debris. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. "This place gives me the creeps," Ben said, his flashlight illuminating the dark corridors. "Just stick together," Jake said, trying to sound brave. "We'll be fine." As they moved deeper into the asylum, they heard faint whispers and distant footsteps, though they were the only ones there. Or so they thought. While exploring a particularly dark hallway, Lisa suddenly screamed. "Did you see that?" She pointed towards a shadowy figure that disappeared around the corner. "What did you see?" Jake asked, rushing to her side. "A person, or something that looked like one," Lisa replied, shaking. "Let's check it out," Ben suggested, though his voice was shaky. They cautiously followed, but the figure was gone. Instead, they found an old, rusted wheelchair with fresh scratch marks on the floor. In one of the rooms, they found old patient records and disturbing photos. The files detailed horrific experiments conducted on the patients. "This is sick," Sarah said, flipping through the documents. "No wonder this place is abandoned." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The friends rushed to open it, but it was stuck. The room grew colder, and they heard a low, guttural growl. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, panic setting in. They managed to pry the door open and fled down the corridor. The whispers grew louder, and they could feel a presence following them. Sarah looked back and saw shadowy figures closing in. "Run!" she screamed. They raced through the maze-like hallways, trying to find an exit. The spirits of the asylum's past residents seemed to be everywhere, their wails echoing through the walls. "We're not alone," Ben panted, fear evident in his voice. The group stumbled upon a chapel within the asylum, its stained glass windows cracked but still intact. The room had an eerie calmness, and the spirits seemed to avoid it. "Maybe we can hide here," Lisa suggested, her voice trembling. They barricaded the doors and huddled together, trying to catch their breath. As they sat in the dim light of their flashlights, they noticed a hidden door behind the altar. "Should we check it out?" Jake asked. "We don't have a choice," Ben replied. They opened the hidden door and found a narrow staircase leading down to a secret basement. The air grew colder as they descended. The basement was filled with old medical equipment and cages. "This must be where they conducted their experiments," Sarah whispered. As they explored, they found a large, iron-bound book, filled with incantations and rituals. The book seemed to pulse with a dark energy. "We need to destroy this," Jake said. "It might be the source of the curse." With the book in hand, they returned to the chapel. They decided to perform a ritual to break the curse. As they began chanting from the book, the spirits became more aggressive, banging on the doors and windows. "Keep going," Alex shouted. The room shook, and the spirits' wails grew louder. Just as it seemed the spirits would break through, a blinding light filled the chapel, and the spirits screamed one final time before vanishing. "It's over," Emily whispered, dropping the book. The spirits gone, the friends made their way out of the asylum. The building seemed less menacing now, the air lighter. "We made it," Lisa said, relief evident in her voice. As they reached the forest edge, they turned back to see the asylum one last time. It stood silently, as if the horrors within had finally been laid to rest. "We should go," Ben said, "and never speak of this place again." Back in town, life slowly returned to normal. The friends promised each other to never speak of the asylum again. However, the memories of that night lingered. A few weeks later, Sarah received a package. Inside was another iron-bound book, similar to the one they had destroyed. Attached was a note, "For your collection." Her heart raced as she realized the curse might not be broken after all. Lily received a mysterious letter inviting her to an old mansion that once belonged to her ancestors. She had always been curious about her family's past and decided to visit. The mansion was isolated, surrounded by overgrown trees and an eerie silence. As she walked towards the door, the sky turned gray and the wind began to howl. Lily pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the mansion was dark and dusty, with cobwebs hanging from the corners. An old chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. The door slammed shut behind her, making her jump. Lily stepped into the grand hall, where portraits of stern-looking ancestors lined the walls. Their eyes seemed to follow her as she moved. She felt a chill run down her spine as she heard faint whispering. The room was dimly lit by the light filtering through the grimy windows. Lily found herself in the mansion's library, filled with dusty books and old furniture. An old leather-bound book lay open on a desk. As she approached, she saw it was a diary detailing strange rituals and mysterious disappearances. The air grew colder, and she felt an unseen presence watching her. Lily discovered a secret door behind a bookshelf. She hesitated but then pushed it open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down. The air was damp and cold. With her flashlight in hand, she began to descend, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence. The basement was even colder, with strange symbols painted on the walls and an old wooden table in the center. On the table were ancient artifacts and melted candles. Lily felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She heard whispers growing louder, almost as if they were coming from the walls themselves. Lily's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Panic set in as the whispers turned into screams. She fumbled to turn the flashlight back on. When she did, she saw a ghostly figure standing by the table, staring at her with hollow eyes. She backed away in terror. Desperate to escape, Lily turned and ran up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, with doors slamming and shadows moving around her. She reached the front door, threw it open, and ran into the stormy night, her heart pounding. She didn't stop until she reached her car. Breathing heavily, Lily glanced back at the mansion as she reached her car. In an upstairs window, she saw the ghostly figure watching her. The whispers faded, but the memory of that night would haunt her forever. She drove away, vowing never to return. On a foggy night, 4 friends, Jack, Mia, Ethan, and Sophie, arrived at Blackwood Manor. The old abandoned mansion was said to be cursed. They had come to investigate the legend. They pushed it open the heavy front door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung in the corners. The living room was filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. An antique chandelier hung from the ceiling, and a grand piano stood in the corner. Suddenly, the piano played a single, eerie note, causing everyone to jump. They moved to the library, where shelves of dusty books lined the walls. Jack picked up an old book, and as he opened it, a cold breeze swept through the room, making the candles flicker. They entered a long hallway filled with old portraits. The eyes of the portraits seemed to follow them as they walked. Mia shivered, feeling a chill run down her spine. At the end of the hallway, they found a door leading to the basement. Despite their fear, they decided to go down. The wooden stairs creaked under their weight, and the air grew colder with each step. The basement was cold and damp. Strange symbols were drawn on the walls. In the corner, they saw a ghostly figure of a woman in a tattered dress. She reached out to them, and they felt an icy chill. Terrified, they ran up the stairs and out of the house. The door slammed shut behind them, and they could still hear the ghostly whispers. They vowed never to return. Back at their homes, the friends sat together, still shaken by their experience. They knew they had encountered something truly terrifying and decided never to speak of it again.
The camera pans over a serene lake surrounded by towering trees. The water reflects the golden hues of the setting sun, creating a picturesque scene. But beneath the tranquil surface lies a sinister secret waiting to be uncovered. A group of friends arrives at a lakeside cabin for a weekend getaway. They laugh and joke as they unpack their bags, eager to unwind and enjoy the beauty of nature. As night falls, one of the friends, Emma, shares a local legend about the lake. A tale of a vengeful spirit haunting its waters, seeking revenge on anyone who dares to disturb its slumber. The group dismisses the legend as mere superstition. Strange occurrences plague the cabin. whispers in the night, unexplained shadows flickering in the corners, and cold drafts chilling the air. The friends brush off their unease, attributing it to the eerie atmosphere of the lake. Exploring the cabin, one of the friends, Jack, finds an old journal hidden beneath the floorboards. Its pages reveal the tragic history of the lake, a tale of betrayal and murder that has haunted its shores for centuries. The vengeful spirit of the lake manifests, its ghostly form stalking the friends with malicious intent. Terror grips their hearts as they realize they are being hunted by a force beyond their understanding. In a desperate bid for survival, the friends confront the vengeful spirit at the water's edge. Armed with courage and determination, they must uncover the truth behind the spirit's rage to break the curse that binds them. Through bravery and sacrifice, the friends uncover the truth behind the spirit's curse and lay it to rest. As dawn breaks, they emerge from the darkness, forever changed by their harrowing ordeal.
Greystone Mansion had always been shrouded in mystery in the town of Pine Hill. On a cold, foggy evening, Sarah, an enthusiastic journalist, arrived to investigate the rumors of hauntings for her upcoming article. She parked her car near the gate, feeling a shiver of excitement mixed with dread. The mansion loomed large and foreboding in the mist. Sarah pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the mansion was dark and cold, the air thick with dust. She turned on her flashlight, revealing a grand but decayed foyer. Her footsteps echoed ominously as she ventured deeper into the mansion, feeling a growing sense of unease. As Sarah explored the mansion, she felt a sudden chill. She turned and saw a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her questioning her sanity. Determined, she continued to the library, where she hoped to find records about the mansion's dark past. In the library, Sarah found rows of old, dusty books. As she searched through them, she heard whispers and the sound of pages turning on their own. She discovered an old diary belonging to the mansion's original owner, Lord Greystone. The entries spoke of dark rituals and a curse placed on the house. Sarah's exploration led her to a room filled with mirrors. As she walked through, her reflection seemed to move on its own, eyes following her with an unsettling intensity. One mirror in particular drew her attention. In it, she saw the ghostly figure of a woman crying, her eyes pleading for help. She reached out, but the image disappeared. Sarah discovered a hidden door behind a tattered curtain in the study. She descended the creaky stairs into a dark basement. The room was filled with strange symbols painted on the walls and old dusty books on a table. She found a journal detailing dark rituals and a curse placed on the house by its original owner, Lord Greystone. As Sarah read the journal, the basement grew colder. A ghostly figure of Lord Greystone appeared, his face twisted with rage. He pointed at Sarah and screamed, "You should not have come here!" The walls shook, and the air filled with a chilling wind. Sarah knew she had to leave immediately. Sarah bolted up the stairs, the spirit's screams echoing behind her. She raced through the mansion, the walls seeming to close in on her. She burst through the front door and into the night, gasping for breath. The house stood silent and still, but she could feel the weight of its curse pressing down on her. Back in her apartment, Sarah reviewed the photos and notes she had taken. The evidence of the haunting was undeniable. She wrote her article, revealing the dark history of Greystone Mansion. As she finished, she felt a cold draft and heard Lord Greystone's voice whisper, "You cannot escape the curse." She knew the haunting was far from over.
On a dark, windy night, 4 friends, Tom, Alice, Sam, and Lucy, stood at the entrance of an old abandoned mansion on Hollow Hill. They were dared to spend the night inside the house, which was rumored to be haunted. They pushed open the heavy front door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the house was dark and filled with dust. Old furniture was covered in white sheets, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. They entered the living room, where an old dusty couch sat under a large broken window. A grand piano stood in the corner, its keys covered in dust. Suddenly, the piano played a single eerie note, making them jump. They decided to explore upstairs. The wooden stairs creaked with each step. At the top, they found a long hallway with several closed doors. A cold breeze made them shiver as they heard a faint whispering sound. They opened one of the doors and found a room with old children's toys scattered on the floor. The air was freezing, and the rocking chair in the corner started to move on its own. They heard a child's laughter echoing around them. Panicked, they ran downstairs and found a door leading to the basement. Despite their fear, they decided to investigate. The basement was colder and darker, with a damp smell. They found strange symbols on the walls. In the basement, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw the ghostly figure of a woman in a tattered dress. She looked at them with hollow eyes and whispered, "Leave this place." Screaming, they ran up the stairs and out of the house. The door slammed shut behind them, and they could still hear the ghostly whispers. They vowed never to return to Hollow Hill. Back at home, the friends sat together, still shaken by their experience. They knew they had encountered something truly terrifying and agreed to never speak of it again.
The sun was setting as Emily, a young journalist, arrived at Ravenswood Manor. She had heard rumors of the haunted mansion and wanted to investigate for her next big story. The old, decaying building stood at the edge of the town, surrounded by overgrown trees. As she approached the iron gates, a sense of dread washed over her. Emily pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the mansion was dark and cold. Dust covered the floor and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. She turned on her flashlight, revealing a grand but neglected interior. Her footsteps echoed ominously as she walked down the main hallway. In the dim light, Emily noticed portraits lining the walls. The eyes in the paintings seemed to follow her every move, making her uneasy. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper, like someone calling her name. She turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Her heart began to race. Emily entered the music room, where an old piano stood covered in dust. As she approached, she heard a soft, haunting melody. The keys were moving on their own, playing a melancholic tune. The room grew colder, and Emily felt an unseen presence watching her. In the library, Emily found a hidden door behind a bookcase. Inside, she discovered a small room filled with strange artifacts and an old leather-bound journal. She opened the journal and read about dark rituals and a curse placed on the mansion. The final entry warned of a vengeful spirit trapped within the house. As Emily read the journal, the temperature dropped sharply. She heard footsteps approaching and saw a shadowy figure materialize in the doorway. The figure was a ghostly woman with a twisted expression of rage. She pointed at Emily, her voice echoing with anger. "You must leave this place!" Emily's survival instincts kicked in, and she bolted from the hidden room. She raced through the dark hallways, the spirit's angry screams echoing behind her. She reached the front door and flung it open, escaping into the night. Gasping for breath, she looked back to see the mansion standing silent and still, but she knew she had been lucky to escape with her life. Safe at home, Emily reviewed her notes and the footage she had captured. The evidence of the haunting was undeniable. She wrote her article, revealing the mansion's dark history and the vengeful spirit. As she finished, she felt a cold breeze and heard a whisper, "Thank you." She knew the spirits had found some peace.
The abandoned Ravenswood Asylum stood on a hill, shrouded in fog and mystery. Jessica, a paranormal investigator, arrived at dusk, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. She parked her car and gazed at the looming building, its windows dark and empty like soulless eyes. Jessica pushed open the heavy front door, which groaned loudly. Inside, the asylum was dark and cold. She turned on her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The walls were lined with peeling paint and graffiti, and the floor was littered with debris. Her footsteps echoed eerily as she ventured deeper. As Jessica explored the main hallway, she felt a sudden chill. She turned to see a ghostly figure of a nurse standing at the end of the corridor. The nurse's face was pale and expressionless, and she slowly raised a finger to her lips as if to shush Jessica. Then she vanished into thin air. Jessica entered a room that appeared to have been a common area. Old, broken furniture was scattered around, and the walls were covered with faded, eerie drawings. As she examined the drawings, she heard faint whispers. She turned to see shadowy figures moving along the walls, their eyes glowing faintly. In the corner of the room, Jessica found an old journal. She opened it and read about the asylum's dark history, experiments on patients, mysterious deaths, and cover-ups. The journal mentioned a hidden basement where the worst atrocities occurred. Determined, Jessica set out to find it. Jessica found a hidden door behind a bookshelf, leading to a staircase that descended into darkness. She took a deep breath and started down the steps. The basement was cold and damp, with rusty equipment and old stained medical tools scattered around. The air was thick with the smell of decay. In the basement, Jessica saw the spirits of the patients. They were trapped, reliving their torment. A particularly sorrowful spirit, a young woman named Alice, revealed that the asylum's director had performed cruel experiments on them. The spirits begged Jessica to help them find peace. Jessica found a hidden chamber where the director's spirit lingered, still obsessed with his experiments. She confronted him, demanding he release the tortured souls. The director's spirit raged, but the power of the trapped souls combined with Jessica's determination forced him to vanish into the ether. With the director's spirit gone, the asylum began to crumble. Jessica hurried out, watching from a safe distance as the building collapsed. The spirits were finally free, and a sense of peace settled over the area. As the sun rose, the fog lifted, revealing a bright new day.
On a chilly autumn evening, four friends, Mark, Lisa, Danny, and Sophie, arrived at the small, deserted village of Hollow Creek. They had heard rumors of a haunting and wanted to investigate. The village was eerily quiet, with mist curling around the old, decaying buildings. The friends walked through the empty streets, their footsteps echoing. They saw abandoned houses, broken street lamps, and overgrown gardens. As they explored, they noticed strange symbols carved into the doors and walls of the houses. They found an old inn at the center of the village. The door creaked as they pushed it open. Inside, the inn was dark and cold. Dust covered the furniture and a musty smell filled the air. They decided to stay there for the night, hoping to uncover the village's secrets. As night fell, the friends gathered in the main room of the inn. They set up their sleeping bags and lit a small fire in the fireplace. The flickering light cast eerie shadows on the walls. They heard faint whispers and creaks, but dismissed them as the old building settling. At midnight, Sophie woke up to a strange noise. She saw a figure standing at the foot of her sleeping bag. She screamed, waking the others. The figure vanished, but the friends could still feel its presence. They huddled together, too scared to sleep. The next morning, they decided to search the inn for clues. In an old chest, they found a diary. It belonged to a girl named Emily who lived in the village decades ago. Her last entry spoke of a dark presence that haunted Hollow Creek, driving the villagers away. As they read the diary, they learned that Emily had tried to summon spirits to help the village, but something went wrong. Instead of help, she had unleashed a malevolent entity. The friends realized that the haunting was real, and they were in grave danger. Suddenly, the room grew cold. The friends could see their breath in the air. The entity appeared before them, a dark, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. It moved towards them, whispering in a language they couldn't understand. Panic set in as they tried to find a way out. Mark found an old key in the diary. Desperate, he used it on a hidden door they hadn't noticed before. The door led to a tunnel beneath the inn. The friends rushed through the tunnel, the entity's whispers echoing behind them. They emerged outside, gasping for breath. The friends didn't stop running until they were far from Hollow Creek. Exhausted and terrified, they vowed never to speak of what happened. As they left, they could still hear the faint whispers of the entity, warning them never to return. In the dead of night, a group of friends, Sarah, Mark, and Emily, arrive at the imposing Ravenswood Manor, a sprawling mansion nestled deep within the forest. The moon casts an eerie glow over the overgrown grounds as they approach the decrepit mansion, drawn by tales of its haunted past. As they step through the creaking front door, the group is enveloped by darkness. The air is thick with dust, and the floorboards groan beneath their feet. Sarah lights a lantern, casting flickering shadows on the walls as they explore the abandoned foyer. As they venture further into the mansion, they are greeted by the sound of whispers echoing through the hallways. The walls seem to close in around them, and Sarah's lantern flickers ominously. They exchange nervous glances, but press on, determined to uncover the secrets of Ravenswood Manor. In the heart of the mansion, they discover a forgotten library, its shelves lined with dusty tomes and ancient manuscripts. Emily's heart races as she picks up a weathered book, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and arcane rituals. Suddenly, a cold breeze fills the room, and the books on the shelves begin to sway as if moved by unseen hands. As they explore further, they come across a portrait hanging on the wall, a grim-faced man with piercing eyes that seem to follow their every move. Mark shudders as he gazes into the man's cold, lifeless eyes, and Sarah quickly averts her gaze, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. As night falls, the mansion comes alive with ghostly apparitions and otherworldly sounds. Emily's heart races as she catches a glimpse of a figure moving in the shadows, its form shifting and indistinct. She cries out in fear, and the others rush to her side, their lanterns casting shaky light on the empty hallway. As the night wears on, the group's sanity begins to fray. They are plagued by visions and nightmares, their minds filled with images of death and despair. Sarah clutches her head in agony as she hears voices whispering in the darkness, urging her to embrace the madness that lurks within Ravenswood Manor. In a desperate bid to escape the madness that grips them, the group confronts the malevolent force that haunts Ravenswood Manor. With trembling hands, they perform a ritual to banish the darkness, their voices raised in a desperate plea for salvation. And as the first light of dawn breaks through the windows, the mansion shudders and groans, the darkness receding into the shadows from whence it came. On a cold, windy night, four friends, Anna, Tom, Lisa, and Mark, stand before the crumbling mansion on the outskirts of town. The mansion, long abandoned, is rumored to be haunted. Tom dares the group to spend the night inside. With nervous laughter, they agree, pushing open the rusted gate. The front door creaks loudly as they step inside. The air is thick with dust and the scent of decay. Cobwebs hang from the ceiling, and old broken furniture is strewn about. They switch on their flashlights, illuminating the dark, gloomy hallway. They enter the living room, where a grand fireplace sits cold and empty. Faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors line the walls. Lisa notices a portrait with eyes that seem to follow them. She shivers but dismisses it as her imagination. A sudden thud echoes through the house. They freeze, listening. Mark suggests it's just the house settling, but Anna isn't so sure. They decide to check it out, moving cautiously towards the source of the noise. They find a hidden door behind a dusty curtain. It creaks open to reveal a small, cluttered room filled with old books and strange artifacts. A single candle flickers on a table, though no one has been here for years. As they examine the room, a ghostly figure appears, hovering near the candle. It's a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her eyes filled with sorrow. She reaches out to them, her mouth moving as if speaking, but no sound comes out. The friends back away in terror. Anna bravely steps forward, trying to communicate with the apparition. The ghost points to a diary on the table. Anna opens it and begins to read aloud. The diary reveals the tragic story of the woman who was wrongfully accused of witchcraft and died in the mansion. As Anna reads, the house begins to shake. Objects fly off the shelves, and the ghostly woman lets out a silent scream. The friends realize they need to leave immediately. They rush out of the room and down the hallway, the mansion seemingly coming alive around them. They burst through the front door and race to the gate. The mansion's windows rattle violently, and ghostly faces press against the glass. They don't stop until they are far away, the mansion still visible in the distance, now eerily silent. Back in the safety of their homes, the friends try to forget the night's events. But each night, they are haunted by the image of the ghostly woman and the sounds of the mansion. They realize the past isn't easily forgotten, and some echoes never fade.
Lena, Mark, and Sarah arrived at Ravenwood House, an old, decrepit mansion that had been abandoned for years. The house stood at the end of a lonely road, surrounded by thick, twisted trees. They were there to investigate the rumored hauntings for their paranormal blog. "This place is giving me chills already," Sarah whispered, hugging her coat tighter. "Perfect for our blog," Mark replied, setting up his camera. "Let's capture some real scares." Lena pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly. "Let's go in and set up. The sooner we start, the sooner we can leave." Inside, the house was dark and filled with the smell of mold and dust. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and old furniture was scattered about. As they explored, they found old portraits on the walls, books with yellowed pages, and broken trinkets. Look at this, Mark said, picking up a dusty photograph of a family. They must have lived here a long time ago. Lena shivered. It feels like they're still watching us. Sarah glanced nervously at the dark corners. Let's just get the footage and get out of here. Lena found an old leather-bound journal on a table covered in dust. She opened it carefully and started reading aloud. The journal belonged to the house's previous owner, detailing strange occurrences and sightings of a ghostly figure. Listen to this, Lena said, her voice trembling. The owner saw a woman in white every night standing by the window. Sarah hugged herself. That's creepy. What happened to them? Lena turned the pages. It just stops. No explanation. Mark filmed Lena reading. This is exactly what we need. Keep going. As they continued exploring, the temperature in the room suddenly dropped. They saw a figure in a white dress standing at the end of the hallway. The figure's face was obscured by shadows, but they could feel its eyes on them. Do you see that? Mark whispered, his camera shaking. Yes, Sarah replied, her voice barely audible. Let's get out of here. The figure started moving towards them. They ran, slamming a door behind them. We have to leave, Sarah insisted, her eyes wide with fear. Not yet, Lena said, determined. We need to find out what's really happening here. Lena found another entry in the journal that described a ritual to banish the spirit. They needed to gather candles, salt, and a mirror. The tension was palpable as they worked quickly, knowing the spirit could return any moment. Are you sure this will work? Mark asked, placing candles around the room. It has to, Lena replied, pouring salt in a circle. We don't have any other choice. Sarah held the mirror, her hands shaking. Just hurry. As they began the ritual, the spirit returned, more menacing than before. It howled and thrashed against the barrier created by the salt circle. Lena chanted the incantation from the journal, her voice growing stronger with each word. Keep it away from us, Sarah shouted, clutching the mirror tightly. We're almost there, Lena yelled, her focus unbroken. The spirit's form began to waver and dissolve as the ritual reached its climax. With a final, desperate scream, it vanished into thin air. They collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. We did it, Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. Let's get out of here, Sarah urged, her eyes still wide with fear. They gathered their equipment and left the house, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. As they walked away, they felt a sense of triumph and relief. Let's never do this again, Mark said, managing a weak smile. As they walked away from the house, the sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the landscape. The house behind them was now just a distant memory, a place they would never forget but never return to. Let's make a pact, Lena said, stopping to look at her friends. We never speak of this again. Agreed, Mark and Sarah said in unison. They walked on, leaving the haunted Ravenwood house behind, grateful to have survived their night of terror.
The old house stood at the end of the lonely street, its windows shattered and its wooden walls weathered by time. Sarah had heard stories about the house since she was a child. It was said to be haunted, a place where shadows whispered secrets and the air was thick with dread. Determined to prove it was all just a myth, she decided to spend the night there. As Sarah pushed open the creaking door, the musty smell of decay hit her. The interior was dark, with only the faintest light filtering through the grimy windows. She stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under her weight. Every corner seemed to be alive with whispers, just out of reach. Sarah moved cautiously into the living room. The furniture was covered in dust and cobwebs draped from the ceiling. An old grandfather clock stood against the wall, its hands frozen at midnight. As she looked around, she heard a faint whispering, like someone speaking from the shadows. On the wall hung a portrait of a stern-looking man. His eyes seemed to follow Sarah as she moved. She felt a chill run down her spine. The whispers grew louder, and for a moment she thought she saw the man's eyes blink. She stepped back in fear, her heart racing. Sarah found herself drawn to a door partially hidden behind a tattered curtain. She hesitated before pulling it open, revealing a set of stairs leading down into the darkness. The whispers were clearer now, urging her to descend. With trembling hands, she held her flashlight and began her descent. The basement was cold and damp, the walls lined with old shelves holding dusty jars and forgotten relics. The whispers were louder here, almost tangible. Sarah felt a presence behind her and spun around but saw nothing. Suddenly, an old radio crackled to life, playing a haunting lullaby. Sarah's flashlight flickered and died. In the darkness, she felt something brush against her arm. She backed away, stumbling over an old trunk. The whispers were deafening now. She managed to open the trunk, revealing an old diary. The pages told the story of a man who had lost his family and descended into madness, cursing the house and anyone who entered. Realizing the danger, Sarah grabbed the diary and rushed up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, the whispers turning into screams. Doors slammed shut around her, and the air grew colder. She reached the front door and burst out into the night, the whispers fading behind her. Outside, Sarah collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. She looked back at the house, now silent and still. She knew she could never explain what happened, but she had the diary as proof. As she walked away, she heard one last whisper in the wind, promising that the shadows would always be watching. Blackwood Manor, a decrepit Victorian mansion, looms ominously amidst the dense forest. Boarded-up windows and crumbling facades tell tales of neglect and decay. The moon's pale light casts an eerie glow upon the scene, setting the stage for the horrors that lie within. The once manicured grounds of Blackwood Manor now lie in disarray, overrun by tangled bushes and fallen leaves. A thick fog rolls in from the surrounding forest, blanketing the landscape in an eerie haze, obscuring whatever secrets may be hidden within. The iron gates of Blackwood Manor, once grand and imposing, now stand tall and rusted, barely visible through the overgrowth that surrounds them. A chill wind howls through the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that seems to seep into the very bones of those who dare to approach. Within Blackwood Manor, the foyer is shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by flickering candlelight that casts long shadows upon the faded wallpaper. Dust dances in the air, stirred by a silence so palpable it feels almost suffocating, as if the very walls are holding their breath. In the dining room of Blackwood Manor, a long table is set with decaying remnants of a feast long past. Cobwebs hang from the ornate chandelier above, their delicate threads swaying in the stagnant air. The scent of decay hangs heavy, a grim reminder of the mansion's forgotten glory days. Within Blackwood Manor's library, dusty shelves groan under the weight of forgotten knowledge. Moonlight filters through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns upon the worn carpet. The air is thick with the smell of aging paper and the secrets contained within the ancient tomes that line the walls. In the ballroom of Blackwood Manor, a grand chandelier hangs from the ceiling, its once glistening crystals now dull and lifeless. Moonlight filters through broken windows, casting eerie shadows upon the cracked dance floor. The room echoes with the ghostly laughter of revelries long past, a haunting reminder of the mansion's former glory. Within the study of Blackwood Manor, dusty books and forgotten artifacts clutter every available surface. A single candle flickers on the desk, its feeble light casting eerie shadows upon the walls. Ghostly figures seem to dance in the darkness, their presence felt but never seen, adding to the sense of unease that permeates the room. In the bedroom of Blackwood Manor, a canopy bed stands like a relic of a bygone era, its once luxurious linens now covered in dust and cobwebs. Moonlight filters through cracked windows, casting eerie shadows upon the peeling wallpaper. The room is frozen in time, a silent witness to the horrors that haunt its halls. As dawn breaks over Blackwood Manor, the backyard is bathed in the soft light of a new day. The full extent of its decay is revealed in the morning light, as mist rises from the damp earth, shrouding the crumbling structures in an ethereal glow. The horrors of the night retreat with the darkness, but the memory of their presence lingers like a shadow upon the land.
Sarah and Jake arrive at the secluded cabin they rented for a weekend getaway. The cabin is nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by tall trees. As they unpack, Sarah notices an old photograph tucked away in a drawer. She feels a chill but shrugs it off. That night, strange occurrences begin. Sarah hears footsteps outside the cabin and sees shadows moving in the darkness. She wakes Jake, but he dismisses it as her imagination. Sarah feels uneasy, sensing an eerie presence looming around the cabin. The next day, Sarah explores the cabin's attic and finds an old journal hidden beneath a dusty trunk. The journal belongs to a previous tenant, detailing bizarre encounters with an unknown entity. Sarah's heart races as she reads about the cabin's dark past. As night falls again, the paranormal activity escalates. Sarah and Jake hear whispers echoing through the cabin and feel a cold draft despite the fireplace burning brightly. Sarah catches glimpses of a shadowy figure lurking in the corners, sending shivers down her spine. Driven by fear, Sarah confronts the entity, demanding to know its intentions. The air grows heavy as a voice whispers sinister messages, filling Sarah with dread. Jake tries to intervene, but the entity's malevolent presence overwhelms them. With the entity's grip tightening, Sarah and Jake decide to flee the cabin. They race through the forest, their hearts pounding with each step. Behind them, they hear haunting laughter echoing through the trees, fueling their desperation to escape. Even after leaving the cabin, Sarah and Jake can't shake the feeling of being watched. Strange occurrences follow them, reminding them of the entity's lingering presence. They vow never to return to the cursed cabin, haunted by the memories of their terrifying ordeal. Months later, Sarah and Jake still grapple with the trauma of their encounter at the cabin. They seek solace in each other's company, finding comfort in the knowledge that they survived the horrors of the haunted woods. Yet, the memory of the malevolent entity continues to haunt their dreams, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows.
Ravenswood House had a reputation for being the most haunted place in the small town of Millfield. On a misty autumn evening, Emma, a curious journalist, arrived to investigate the legends surrounding the mansion. She parked her car at the gate, shivering from the cold and the eerie atmosphere. The mansion loomed in the distance, its windows like dark, watchful eyes. Emma pushed open the creaky wooden door of Ravenswood House. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Dust covered every surface and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. She turned on her flashlight, revealing a grand but decayed foyer. Her footsteps echoed as she ventured further inside, the silence pressing in on her. As Emma explored the mansion, she felt a sudden chill. Turning a corner, she saw a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her heart pounding. Determined to uncover more, she made her way to the library, hoping to find records of the mansion's dark past. In the library, Emma found rows of dusty old books. As she searched through them, she heard whispers and the sound of pages turning by themselves. She discovered an old diary belonging to the mansion's original owner, Lady Ravenswood. The entry spoke of dark rituals and a curse that had been placed on the house and its inhabitants. Emma's exploration led her to a room filled with mirrors. As she walked through, her reflection seemed to move on its own, eyes following her with an unsettling intensity. One mirror in particular caught her attention. In it, she saw the ghostly figure of a woman crying, her eyes pleading for help. Emma reached out to touch the mirror, but the image vanished. Emma discovered a hidden door behind a tattered curtain in the study. She descended the creaky stairs into a dark, musty basement. The room was filled with strange symbols painted on the walls and old dusty books scattered on a table. She found a journal detailing the dark rituals and a curse placed on the house by Lady Ravenswood. As Emma read the journal, the basement grew colder. A ghostly figure of Lady Ravenswood appeared, her face twisted with rage. She pointed at Emma and screamed, "You should not have come here." The walls shook, and the air filled with a chilling wind. Emma knew she had to leave immediately. Emma bolted up the stairs, the spirit's screams echoing behind her. She raced through the mansion, the walls seeming to close in on her. She burst through the front door and into the night, gasping for breath. The house stood silent and still, but she could feel the weight of its curse pressing down on her. Back in her apartment, Emma reviewed the photos and notes she had taken. The evidence of the haunting was undeniable. She wrote her article, revealing the dark history of Ravenswood House. As she finished, she felt a cold draft and heard Lady Ravenswood's voice whisper, "You cannot escape the curse." Emma knew the haunting was far from over.
Michael, a man in his late 30s, receives a surprising letter. His great-uncle, whom he barely knew, has passed away, leaving him an old manor in the remote countryside. Intrigued and financially struggling, Michael decides to visit the manor with his wife, Sarah, and their teenage daughter, Emily. Michael reads the letter aloud. It says we have inherited an estate. Sarah looks at him skeptically. Are you sure this is a good idea? Michael nods. We could use a fresh start. Besides, what harm could it do? Emily, always up for an adventure, adds, It sounds exciting. Let's go. The family arrives at the manor in the late afternoon. The mansion is grand but clearly neglected, surrounded by overgrown gardens and tall, dense trees. The sky is overcast, casting a gloomy shadow over the scene. Emily shivers. This place gives me the creeps. Michael tries to be optimistic. It's just old. We can fix it up. Sarah clutches Emily's hand. Let's stay close and see what's inside. Inside, the manor is filled with dust, cobwebs, and a musty smell. The furniture is covered with white sheets. As they explore, Emily finds an old, ornate mirror in one of the rooms. Unlike the rest of the house, the mirror's surface is strangely clean. Look at this mirror, Emily calls out. Sarah touches the frame. It's beautiful, but it feels out of place. Michael frowns. Why is it so clean? That night, the family tries to settle in. Michael and Sarah fall asleep quickly, but Emily struggles. Around midnight, she hears faint whispers and feels a cold breeze. The mirror in her room begins to fog up, revealing words written from the inside. Help us, it reads. Terrified, Emily runs to her parents' room. Mom, Dad, there's something in the mirror. Michael, groggy, tries to comfort her. It's just your imagination, Emily. Go back to sleep. The next day, the family visits the local library to learn more about the manor. They discover that it was owned by Michael's great-uncle, a reclusive man with a dark interest in the occult. Sarah reads from an old newspaper. Local recluse found dead under mysterious circumstances. Manor believed to be haunted. Michael sighs. This explains a lot. We need to be careful. Emily, still shaken, adds, What if the spirits are still here? Back at the manor, Michael discovers a hidden door in the basement. Inside, they find an old study filled with books on the occult, strange artifacts, and a large locked chest. Sarah examines a book. He was into dark stuff. This can't be good. Michael tries to open the chest, but fails. We need to find the key. There might be answers inside. Emily points to a strange symbol on the wall. I've seen this symbol before, in my room. That night, the hauntings escalate. Objects move on their own, and ghostly apparitions appear. Emily is dragged out of bed by an unseen force, and Sarah sees a shadowy figure standing at the end of the hallway, watching them. We have to leave now, Sarah screams, but the doors are locked and won't open. Michael grabs an old book from the study. This book has instructions to banish the spirits. We need to perform the ritual. Desperate, the family gathers in the basement to perform the ritual. They light candles and arrange the symbols in a circle. Michael reads the incantation aloud, while Sarah and Emily hold hands, trembling. As the ritual progresses, the house shakes, and the spirits grow more agitated. A blinding light fills the room, and the spirits are drawn into the circle, screaming. Keep going, Michael! Sarah yells over the noise. With a final shout, Michael completes the incantation, and the spirits vanish. The house falls silent. The next morning, the manor feels different. The oppressive atmosphere is gone, and sunlight streams through the windows. The family packs up their belongings, relieved that the ordeal is over. We should tell someone about this place, Sarah says, looking back at the manor. Michael nods. Let's make sure no one else has to go through this. They drive away, leaving the manor behind. Back home, life seems to return to normal. But one night, Emily finds the old mirror in her room, even though they left it at the manor. Her heart races as she sees words slowly appear on the surface. We are not done, it reads. Emily turns to see a shadowy figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with malevolence. She screams as the room plunges into darkness. Emily and her brother Jack inherit an old mansion from their estranged uncle. The house, nestled deep in the woods, is grand but eerily quiet. As they explore, Emily finds an old, ornate key in a dusty drawer. She keeps it, wondering what it might unlock. That night, Emily wakes up to the sound of whispers and faint footsteps. She dismisses it as her imagination. When she looks out the window, she sees a shadowy figure standing under a tree in the garden. She calls Jack, but the figure is gone when he arrives. The next day, Emily and Jack search for what the key might unlock. They find a hidden door behind a bookshelf in the study. The key fits perfectly, revealing a small room filled with old books, an antique mirror, and a diary. Emily reads the diary and learns it belonged to a woman named Margaret who lived in the mansion years ago. Margaret wrote about seeing a ghostly figure and hearing whispers. Her last entry hints at a hidden treasure in the house. That night, Emily sees the ghostly figure in the mirror. The figure, a woman in old-fashioned clothing, looks sad and mouths the words, "Help me." Terrified, Emily tells Jack, who becomes determined to help her. Emily and Jack search the house for clues about Margaret's hidden treasure. They find a series of letters behind a loose brick in the fireplace. The letters reveal that Margaret's child was taken from her, and she hid a valuable locket somewhere in the house to protect it. As they continue their search, the ghost becomes more active, appearing more frequently and growing more desperate. Emily and Jack follow clues to the attic, where they find a locked chest. The key fits perfectly. Inside the chest, they find Margaret's locket, along with a letter explaining her tragic story. Margaret's spirit appears, looking peaceful. She thanks them silently before fading away, her spirit finally at rest. With Margaret's spirit at rest, the house feels lighter. The whispers and apparitions stop. Emily and Jack decide to stay and restore the mansion, feeling a connection to its history and to Margaret. Months later, Emily and Jack enjoy their peaceful home. They often think about Margaret and the extraordinary events that brought them closer together. The mansion is no longer haunted, but the memories of the past live on in a peaceful way. Evelyn and her friends, Mark, Lisa, and John, stood at the edge of the dense forest, staring at the looming structure of Blackwood Mansion. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out and grab at their feet. The mansion, abandoned for decades, had an eerie aura that made them shiver despite the warm summer evening. "I can't believe we are actually doing this," Lisa muttered, her voice trembling. "It's just for one night," Mark reassured her, though he didn't sound convinced. "We spend the night, prove the ghost stories wrong, and then leave." John, the skeptic of the group, laughed. "Ghosts aren't real. You'll see." Evelyn, the leader of the group, took a deep breath and stepped forward, pushing open the creaking iron gate. "Let's go." Inside the mansion, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The wooden floorboards creaked under their feet as they explored the dimly lit corridors. Each room they entered seemed more decayed than the last, with peeling wallpaper and broken furniture strewn about. "Look at this," John called from one of the rooms. He held up an old photograph of a family, their faces blurred with age. "This must be the original owners." Evelyn shivered. "There's something unsettling about this place." Mark found an old journal on a dusty bookshelf. "Maybe this will tell us more about what happened here." As the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered even though the mansion had no electricity. The sound of footsteps echoed through the halls, though no one was there. Whispers seemed to come from the walls themselves. Lisa clung to Mark. "Did you hear that?" "It's just the wind," John said, though his voice was unsteady. Evelyn held the journal tightly, her eyes scanning the pages. "There's something here. Something about a curse." A loud crash echoed from the hallway, and they all jumped. Mark grabbed a flashlight and led the way, finding a broken mirror on the floor, though no one had touched it. Evelyn's hands trembled as she turned the pages of the journal. "It says here that the family who lived here dabbled in dark magic. They summoned something they couldn't control." Mark's eyes widened. "What did they summon?" "A spirit of vengeance," Evelyn whispered. "It's trapped here, and it feeds on fear." John scoffed, but his face was pale. "This is ridiculous. There are no such things as spirits." Lisa pointed to the mirror. "Then how do you explain that?" Before John could answer, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. Their breath fogged in the air, and a low growl resonated from the shadows. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing red. The friends backed away, their fear palpable. The figure seemed to grow stronger, feeding on their terror. "Stay together!" Evelyn shouted, her voice breaking. John tried to act brave, stepping forward. "Leave us alone." The spirit lashed out, sending John crashing into a wall. Lisa screamed, and Mark pulled her back, trying to protect her. Evelyn held up the journal like a shield. "There's a way to banish it. We just have to find it." Evelyn frantically flipped through the journal, looking for the banishment ritual. "We need to find the symbols and say the words." Mark and Lisa barricaded the door, trying to buy them time. The spirit pounded against it, its growls growing louder. "Found it!" Evelyn cried, showing the page to the others. "Let's do this," Mark said, determination in his eyes. They quickly gathered the materials described in the journal, creating a circle of protection. Evelyn began to chant the words, her voice steady despite the fear. The spirit broke through the door just as Evelyn finished the chant. It roared in fury, but the circle of protection glowed, holding it at bay. "Keep chanting!" Evelyn yelled, her voice filled with authority. The spirit thrashed against the barrier, but it couldn't break through. Slowly, it began to weaken, its form dissolving into the air. With one final, deafening scream, the spirit vanished. The mansion fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. "We did it," Mark said, his voice filled with relief. The friends stumbled out of the mansion, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. They were exhausted, but relieved to be alive. "Let's never do that again," Lisa said, managing a weak smile. Evelyn held up the journal, now closed. "We should make sure no one else ever tries." John nodded. "Agreed. This place should stay forgotten." They walked away, the mansion behind them now just a shadow against the rising sun.
A car winds its way down a narrow road, flanked on both sides by dense forest. Inside, a group of friends chats excitedly, their anticipation palpable as they approach their destination, a secluded cabin deep in the heart of the Whispering Woods. As they round a bend in the road, the cabin comes into view, its weathered facade blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. The friends step out of the car and approach the cabin, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of pine needles covering the ground. The air is cool and crisp, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. They unlock the door and step inside, their excitement mounting as they take in their surroundings. The cozy fireplace, the rustic furniture, the promise of a weekend filled with laughter and adventure. The next day, the friends set out on a hike through the Whispering Woods, eager to explore their surroundings. They follow a narrow trail that winds its way through the dense forest, the canopy overhead casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. As they walk, they hear the faint sound of whispering in the distance, but they dismiss it as nothing more than the wind rustling through the trees. As they hike deeper into the woods, the friends stumble upon an abandoned clearing, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. The grass is overgrown, and the remains of a crumbling stone structure lie scattered among the trees. A sense of unease washes over them as they enter the clearing, the whispering growing louder with each step they take. As they explore the clearing, the friends are overcome by a sense of foreboding, the whispering growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. They exchange nervous glances, their hearts pounding in their chests as they try to locate the source of the strange noises. But the forest remains silent, its secrets hidden beneath a shroud of darkness. Suddenly, one of the friends disappears without a trace, leaving the others panicked and confused. They call out into the darkness, their voices echoing through the trees, but there's no response. Frantic, they search the clearing, their fear mounting with each passing moment. But the forest remains silent, as if swallowing their cries for help. As night falls, the friends begin to unravel, their minds tormented by the whispers that fill the air. They argue and accuse one another, their once strong bonds strained to the breaking point. But as they spiral further into madness, they realize they must confront the darkness that lurks within the Whispering Woods if they have any hope of escaping its grasp. Armed with determination, the remaining friends set out to confront the evil that haunts the Whispering Woods once and for all. They gather in the clearing, their hearts pounding in their chests as they prepare to face their greatest fears. With a final glance at one another, they steel themselves for the battle ahead. As dawn breaks, the remaining friends emerge from the whispering woods, battered and bruised but alive. They exchange weary smiles, knowing that they've faced their fears and emerged stronger for it. Though the scars of their ordeal will never fully heal, they take solace in the knowledge that they've conquered the darkness that once threatened to consume them. Maya received an old handwritten letter inviting her to Ravenwood Manor, a house she had never heard of. The letter was signed by her late grandmother, whom she had never met. Intrigued and seeking answers about her family's past, she decided to visit the manor. As she arrived, the sky was overcast, and the manor stood tall and imposing against the gloomy backdrop. Maya pushed open the heavy front door, which creaked loudly in protest. The air inside was stale, and the grand entrance hall was shrouded in shadows. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the corners. As she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her, making her jump. Maya found her way to the dining room, where a long table was set as if for a grand feast, though everything was covered in dust. Tall candles stood unlit, and an old chandelier hung from the ceiling. Suddenly, she heard a faint whispering, and the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. In the hallway, Maya stopped in front of a large portrait of a stern-looking woman. The plaque read, "Eliza Ravenwood, 1887. The woman's eyes seemed to follow Maya as she moved. She felt a sudden chill and a sense of being watched. A cold breeze brushed past her, causing her to shiver. Exploring further, Maya discovered a hidden passage behind a bookshelf in the library. She pushed the shelf aside and found a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Taking a deep breath, she descended the stairs, her flashlight flickering. The air grew colder with each step. The basement was cold and damp, with strange symbols painted on the walls. An altar stood in the center, surrounded by melted candles and old, tattered books. As Maya approached the altar, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, and she heard distant, echoing whispers. Maya's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The whispers grew louder, and she felt a cold hand brush against her arm. Panic set in as she fumbled for her flashlight. When it flickered back on, she saw the ghostly figure of Eliza Ravenwood standing before her, eyes filled with malice. Maya stumbled back, tripping over a loose floorboard and landing hard. The diary she had found earlier slipped from her grasp, landing open on the floor. The pages detailed Eliza Ravenwood's descent into madness and dark rituals meant to bind her spirit to the house. Maya realized that Eliza's spirit was trying to protect a dark secret hidden within the manor. Determined to escape, Maya grabbed the diary and ran up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, with doors slamming and shadows darting around her. She burst through the front door into the stormy night, her heart pounding. As she reached her car, she looked back at the manor and saw Eliza's ghostly figure watching her from an upstairs window. In the heart of Blackwood Forest, a group of friends, Jack, Sarah, Luke, and Emma, embarks on a dare to explore the forbidden woods. As they enter the forest, tall trees cast long shadows, and a sense of foreboding hangs in the air. Pushing deeper into the forest, they follow a winding path that seems to disappear into the shadows. The air grows cooler, and strange noises echo through the trees. Despite their growing unease, they press on, driven by curiosity and adrenaline. Suddenly, they stumble upon a moonlit clearing, the ground littered with decaying leaves and gnarled roots. In the center stands an ancient, dilapidated cabin, its windows shattered and its doors hanging off their hinges. The air is heavy with the stench of decay. With trepidation, they approach the cabin and cautiously step inside. The interior is shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from their flickering flashlights. Cobwebs cling to the walls and the floorboards creak ominously beneath their feet. As they explore further, they begin to hear faint whispers that seem to emanate from the walls themselves. The whispers grow louder and more insistent, filling the cabin with an otherworldly chorus that sends shivers down their spines. Suddenly, a dark shadow materializes before them, its form shifting and twisting in the dim light. It looms over them, its eyes glowing with malevolence as it reaches out with ghostly hands. Frozen with fear, they realize they have awakened something ancient and sinister. With a collective scream, the friends flee from the cabin, their hearts pounding with terror. They race through the forest, the shadows closing in around them as they run. Behind them, they can hear the echoing laughter of the darkness that lurks within Blackwood Forest. Exhausted and trembling, the friends emerge from Blackwood Forest, their minds reeling from the horrors they've witnessed. They vow never to return to the haunted woods, haunted by the shadows that lurk within its depths.
Emma arrived at Hollow Hill, an old mansion inherited from a distant relative she never knew. Surrounded by a dense forest, the mansion looked abandoned and sinister. The sky was overcast, and a sense of unease washed over her as she approached the entrance. Emma pushed open the heavy wooden door, which groaned loudly. Inside, the mansion was dark and musty. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung in the corners. An eerie silence filled the air, broken only by the distant sound of creaking floorboards. Emma stepped into the living room, where old furniture lay shrouded in white sheets. An old fireplace dominated one wall, with a large mirror above it. She saw a faint movement in the mirror, but when she turned around, the room was empty. The only sound was the faint ticking of an old clock. In the hallway, Emma found portraits of her ancestors. The eyes of the painted figures seemed to follow her. She felt a chill as she passed by a particularly stern-looking man. Suddenly, she heard a whisper, but when she turned around, no one was there. Emma discovered the mansion's library, filled with ancient books and old furniture. She found an old leather-bound journal on a desk. As she opened it, she read about dark rituals and mysterious deaths that plagued her family. The air grew colder, and she felt an unseen presence watching her. Emma noticed a hidden door behind a bookshelf. She hesitated, but pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. The air was damp and cold. Holding her flashlight, she descended the stairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence. The basement was cold and damp, with strange symbols painted on the walls. An altar stood in the center, surrounded by melted candles and old, tattered books. As Emma approached the altar, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, and she heard distant, echoing whispers. Emma's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The whispers grew louder, and she felt a cold hand brush against her arm. Panic set in as she fumbled to turn the flashlight back on. When it flickered back on, she saw a ghostly figure standing by the altar, staring at her with hollow eyes. Desperate to escape, Emma turned and ran up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, with doors slamming and shadows moving around her. She reached the front door, threw it open, and ran into the stormy night, her heart pounding. She didn't stop until she reached her car. Breathing heavily, Emma glanced back at the mansion as she reached her car. In an upstairs window, she saw the ghostly figure watching her. The whispers faded, but the memory of that night would haunt her forever. She drove away, vowing never to return. Clara arrived at Ashwood House, an eerie, dilapidated mansion she had inherited from her aunt. The mansion stood on a hill, surrounded by dense, dark woods. The air was thick with fog, and the only sound was the distant hooting of an owl. As Clara walked up the creaky wooden steps, the front door slowly swung open on its own. Clara stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty hallway. Dust covered the floors, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The walls were lined with faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors. She felt a sudden chill as she closed the door behind her, the silence inside the mansion almost deafening. Clara moved into the living room, where old, tattered furniture was draped in white sheets. An antique piano sat in one corner, its keys yellowed with age. As she walked past, she heard a single note play, sending shivers down her spine. She turned quickly, but no one was there. In the dining room, Clara found a large portrait of her Aunt Margaret above the fireplace. The eyes in the portrait seemed to follow her every move. As she stared at the painting, she heard faint whispering, as if someone was trying to communicate with her. She felt a cold breeze brush past her. In the library, Clara discovered an old, leather-bound diary hidden behind a row of books. The diary belonged to her aunt and detailed strange occurrences and eerie experiences in the house. As she read, the room grew colder, and she felt as if someone was watching her. Behind a bookshelf, Clara found a hidden door leading to a narrow, spiral staircase. She hesitated, but felt compelled to explore. Holding her flashlight, she descended the stairs, each step echoing in the darkness. The air grew colder and more oppressive with every step. The basement was damp and filled with old, dusty furniture covered in sheets. Strange symbols were drawn on the walls. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table with a black candle, which suddenly lit itself. Clara felt a sense of dread as she approached the table. Clara's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The whispers grew louder, and she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She spun around to see a ghostly figure of her Aunt Margaret, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Leave this place," the ghostly figure whispered. Panic-stricken, Clara ran up the stairs, the house seeming to come alive with doors slamming and shadows moving. She burst through the front door into the night, her heart pounding. She didn't stop running until she reached her car, vowing never to return to Ashwood House. Breathing heavily, Clara glanced back at the mansion as she reached her car. In an upstairs window, she saw the ghostly figure of her Aunt Margaret watching her. The whispers faded, but the memory of that night would haunt her forever. She drove away, never looking back. In a remote forest clearing stands an old, dilapidated cabin, its windows boarded up and its door barely hanging on its hinges. 4 friends, Tom, Sarah, Mike, and Emily, arrive at the cabin for a weekend getaway. The sun is setting, casting long shadows over the eerie landscape. Inside the cabin, the air is thick with dust and decay. Cobwebs hang from the rafters, and the floorboards creak ominously underfoot. The friends explore cautiously, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they navigate the dimly lit rooms. As they search the cabin, they discover a trapdoor leading to a dark, musty basement. With trepidation, they descend into the depths below, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air grows colder, and the sound of dripping water echoes off the stone walls. In the basement, they begin to hear faint whispers that seem to echo off the stone walls. The whispers grow louder and more insistent, filling the air with an eerie chorus. The friends exchange nervous glances, their hearts pounding as they try to locate the source of the haunting sounds. Suddenly, ghostly figures materialize before them. Translucent apparitions with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. The ethereal beings glide through the darkness, their movements graceful yet unsettling. The friends watch in horror as the spirits draw closer, their presence filling the basement with a chilling aura. With adrenaline driving them, the friends turn and flee from the basement, their hearts pounding with terror. They scramble up the stairs, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they race for the safety of the cabin above. Behind them, the ghostly spirits follow, their unearthly wails growing fainter as the friends struggle to escape. Exhausted and trembling, the friends burst through the door of the cabin, their minds reeling from the horrors they've witnessed. They collapse on the floor, their bodies shaking with adrenaline and fear. Outside, the moon casts an eerie glow over the forest, as if mourning the events that have unfolded. In a forgotten corner of town stands the decrepit remnants of an asylum, a place shrouded in mystery and whispered tales of horror. A group of curious teenagers, led by their daredevil leader, decides to explore the abandoned asylum one fateful night. As they approach, the building looms ominously against the darkened sky, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. With a sense of trepidation, the teenagers push open the rusty gates of the asylum and step inside. The air is thick with dust and the smell of decay, and the sound of their footsteps echoes through the empty halls. As they explore further, they can't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes are following their every move. As the teenagers make their way through the asylum, they encounter a series of long, dark corridors, lined with doors that lead to unknown rooms. The air grows colder with each step, and strange sounds echo through the halls, a soft whisper here, a distant moan there. Goosebumps prickle their skin as they press on, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they explore deeper into the asylum, the teenagers come across the remnants of the facility's dark past, straitjackets strewn across the floor, rusty medical instruments left behind, and graffiti-covered walls adorned with the names of forgotten patients. The air grows heavy with the weight of the asylum's history, and the teenagers can't shake the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. As they delve deeper into the asylum, the teenagers begin to feel the presence of something malevolent lurking in the shadows, a cold chill that seeps into their bones, a sense of dread that hangs heavy in the air. Strange phenomena occur with increasing frequency, doors slamming shut on their own, objects moving of their own accord, and ghostly apparitions appearing out of the darkness. As the malevolent presence grows stronger, the teenagers realize they must find a way out of the asylum before it's too late. They race through the halls, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors as they search for an exit. But the asylum seems to shift and change around them, leading them deeper into its darkened depths. Cornered by the malevolent presence, the teenagers find themselves face to face with the source of the asylum's haunting, a restless spirit trapped within its walls. With nowhere left to run, they must confront the spirit head-on, armed only with their courage and determination. As the spirit looms before them, they steel themselves for a battle against the forces of darkness. With a final, desperate effort, the teenagers manage to banish the restless spirit from the asylum, freeing it from its eternal torment. As the spirit fades away into the darkness, the asylum begins to crumble around them, its walls crumbling to dust as the dawn breaks over the horizon. With a sense of relief and exhaustion, the teenagers emerge from the ruins, knowing that they've faced their fears and emerged victorious.
Elmwood Manor stood alone, surrounded by tall dead trees. Its windows were dark, and the setting sun cast long, eerie shadows across the overgrown lawn. The sky was a deep orange, adding to the sinister atmosphere. Inside the manor, the foyer was grand but neglected. Dust and cobwebs covered everything, including the old chandelier that hung from the ceiling. A grand staircase led to the upper floors, and debris littered the floor. The living room had a cold fireplace, a dusty rug, and furniture covered in white sheets. Broken windows let in faint light, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. The dining room featured a long table covered in a dusty cloth. Chairs were overturned, and cobwebs hung from the chandelier above. The windows were boarded up, making the room feel even more claustrophobic. The kitchen was cluttered with old rusty pots and broken cabinets. An old wooden table sat in the center, covered in dust and cobwebs, adding to the room's decrepit state. The library was filled with old dusty books and cobwebs. A large, ornate mirror hung on one wall, and a single candle flickered on a desk, casting unsettling shadows that seemed to move on their own. The bedroom featured a large canopy bed covered in dust. The cracked windows let in moonlight, illuminating the peeling wallpaper. An old wardrobe stood open and empty, adding to the room's eerie stillness. The basement was dark and damp, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Old rusty chains hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. The atmosphere was oppressive and filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. A hidden room in the basement was filled with strange artifacts and old books. A large cracked mirror reflected a distorted image, and a single candle flickered on a desk, casting eerie shadows that seemed to shift and move. As dawn broke, Elmwood Manor was bathed in soft, golden light. The shadows receded, but the mansion still looked eerie and abandoned. Birds began to sing, but the air remained heavy with the terror of the night. The haunting was over, but the memories lingered, a testament to the mansion's dark past.
On a dark, stormy night, 5 friends, Alice, Ben, Clara, David, and Eva, walk down a desolate street. They come across an old, dilapidated house at the end of the road. The house is known among locals as the last house on the street, and is rumored to be haunted. Despite their fear, curiosity gets the better of them, and they decide to explore the house. The door creaks loudly as they push it open, revealing a dusty, abandoned interior. They enter the living room, which is filled with old furniture and a large, cracked mirror on the wall. Suddenly, the door slams shut behind them, and they hear faint whispering. The whispering leads them to a hidden door behind the stairs, which opens to a dark basement. Hesitant but determined, they descend the creaky steps, the air growing colder with each step. In the basement, they find an old chest. When they open it, they discover ancient cursed artifacts and a diary. The diary tells the story of a family that disappeared mysteriously, and it warns of a malevolent spirit trapped in the house. As they read the diary, the temperature drops, and a chilling presence fills the room. Shadows begin to move on their own, and the friends see a ghostly figure emerging from the darkness. Realizing they need to escape, they run back up the stairs. The house seems to come alive, with doors slamming and windows shattering. They finally break free and run out into the stormy night, vowing never to return. Back in the safety of their homes, they sit together, shaken but relieved. They know they will never forget the night they encountered the haunted house at the end of the street. On a foggy evening, 4 friends, Jess, Ryan, Maya, and Ethan, arrive at Blackwood Manor, an imposing mansion nestled deep within the woods. The moon casts an eerie glow over the ivy-covered walls as they approach, their footsteps muffled by the dense fog. Jess shivers, feeling a chill run down her spine. With a creak, the massive oak doors of Blackwood Manor swing open, revealing a dimly lit entryway. Cobwebs cling to the high ceiling, and dust dances in the beams of their flashlights as they cautiously step inside. The air is heavy with the scent of age and decay, sending shivers down their spines. Inside the mansion, they navigate a maze of hallways, each corridor seemingly darker and more foreboding than the last. Paint peels from the walls, and the floorboards groan beneath their weight. Strange symbols etched into the wood send shivers down their spines, and they quicken their pace, eager to uncover the mansion's secrets. As they explore, they begin to hear faint whispers that seem to emanate from the very walls of the mansion. The whispers grow louder and more insistent, filling the air with an unsettling chorus. The friends exchange uneasy glances, their senses on high alert as they try to decipher the ghostly messages. Suddenly, ghostly figures materialize before them, translucent apparitions with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. The ethereal beings float through the air, their movements graceful yet unsettling. The friends watch in horror as the spirits draw closer, their presence filling the mansion with a chilling aura. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, the friends turn and flee from the mansion, their hearts pounding with terror. They race through the dark corridors, their breath ragged and their footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind them, the ghostly apparitions follow, their unearthly wails growing fainter as the friends struggle to escape. Exhausted and trembling, the friends burst through the door of the mansion, their minds reeling from the horrors they've witnessed. They collapse on the ground outside, their bodies shaking with adrenaline and fear. The moon casts a soft glow over the forest, a comforting reminder that they have escaped the clutches of Blackwood Manor. Emma, a young writer in her late 20s, inherits Blackwood Manor from her estranged grandmother. The manor is located on the outskirts of a small town surrounded by dense, dark woods. Emma decides to move in, hoping the isolation will inspire her writing. As she arrives, she feels an eerie chill. The mansion, with its tall spires and ivy-covered walls, seems to loom over her ominously. Despite her unease, Emma is determined to make this her new home. On her first night, Emma struggles to sleep. The house is filled with strange noises, the creaking of floorboards, the whisper of the wind through cracks in the windows, and distant, indistinct whispers. She hears what sounds like footsteps outside her bedroom door, but when she checks, no one is there. She returns to bed, her mind racing with unease and exhaustion. The next day, while exploring the house, Emma discovers a locked door in the attic. Curious, she searches the house and finds an old, rusty key hidden in a drawer. She uses the key to unlock the door and finds a small